Greetings, this is Ryan, and this is the first entry of the Game Development Journal for the game with the working title of Rangers of Old. Rangers of Old is a game I'm trying to develop by myself independently as strictly as a hobby. So this game may or may not come out ever. And this journal is just really for friends and for myself, for my future self, to kind of give an idea of where this game is and maybe where it came from and where it wants to go. So with that, a few disclaimers. There's not going to be a lot of pretty stuff to look at on this YouTube video, so I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. I do tend to ramble on some things. Sorry in advance. Just the way I am. There's going to be a few swear words, but I hope you can stick with me on this journey. Okay, let's get to it. So, what is Rangers of Old? Well, you can look at this map, and this is not the game. This is actually a program called Tiled, and it's a great utility if you're using the Unity game engine because it allows you to import maps into the Unity game engine and work with them. Um, Overall, this is what I want the game to look like, especially as far as art style goes. This is art that I plan to use in the game. It's not all my art. It's primarily based on an artist. I bought this content. I have a license to use it in a game as long as I credit the artist, which I have every intention of doing. Um, but I still had to do a lot of artwork myself to make it fit in a gaming way in the Unity engine. But we'll get back to this tiled editor shortly, but I just wanted to show you what this game might look like in the future. So, a little bit of history on this, on the inspiration of this game, and a little bit of the history. Originally, I was going to make a Firefly-esque RPG game. Um, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't continue that game. Most of all, I thought it was going to be a little boring for me to play, and it would be very similar to probably several other RPGs that already exist on the market. And when I really thought about what kind of game I wanted to develop, I wanted to develop a game that was unique and that I would have fun playing, and something, something you might not see in the Steam store on an everyday basis, something that's kind of different from most things you would see. Um, so, as far as the short history of the inspiration of where this game came from, well, briefly, Rangers of Old, the intention is for it to be about a group of rangers who have to upkeep a vast wilderness, and are confronted with events and conflict, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever. And it's not really clear yet in this stage of the development cycle why they have to upkeep this forest. Maybe it's magical. Maybe they're tasked with that from a king or something like that. But the essence of it is, think of Lord of the Rings. I mean, think of the Rangers in Lord of the Rings. One of the things that fascinated me when I read The Hobbit the first time in my life when I was a child was, even though Bilbo and company have this great journey from the Shire all the way to the Lonely Mountain and back, and they see wondrous things and encounter dangerous situations, I felt like they left a lot out. A lot was implied or hinted at and never really fully developed, and that drove me crazy, really, because I wanted to know. I mean, if you know anything about The Hobbit, this forest of Mirkwood was nothing but trouble for the company. They nearly died. They nearly got killed by spiders, by hostile elves. They nearly starved to death. I mean, a lot of very dangerous things happened to them. They encountered, I won't give away the book anymore, um, but other things were left out. Like there was a bona fide path or trail that went through the forest, It was an extension of what was called the Old Road, that started somewhere around the Shire and went all the way east to Dale and the Lonely Mountain. Well, one thing I thought of was who made that trail and who kept that trail maintained. In a forest like a haunted forest like Mirkwood, you would think that would be a never-ending task, especially considering this forest is probably larger than, the state of Nevada. If you go by certain scales that that come with this map. I mean, it's a vast forest. So who in their right mind would upkeep a trail through a haunted forest? Was it the Rangers that were a little more fleshed out in the later Lord of the Rings trilogy? We never really find out, but I always thought that was an interesting aspect of the story. And if they maintained that trail, well, what else did they do? Did they try to keep the giant spiders in check? Did they try to negotiate with the elves to not accost visitors and travelers that went through the forest? Um, and did they keep an eye on the Necromancer and Dol Guldur? What did they do? Because I felt like we got to see Aragorn in Lord of the Rings um, after he basically left the profession of rangers, after he quit his day job and decided to become the king. And I always thought that there could have been so much more to the story. And that's kind of where the inspiration comes from a story perspective or a theme perspective. I mean, other influences include the Game of Thrones show and book series. They have rangers. They guard the wall in the north, and they have to defend against wildlings and monsters. And I always thought that was another interesting aspect that's not really ever truly fleshed out. And always, and from the first time I read it in Martin's novels, I'm like, that would be a great game idea to be the Lord Commander, to manage the wall and the day-to-day operations and making these hard decisions that have an effect on your guys, on the wildlings north of the wall, on the populace south of the wall, and how you managed all these different events and things happening on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to take that theme from Lord of the Rings, from The Hobbit, from Game of Thrones, and kind of make that into a game. So one last thing about inspiration, and I think this is a nice little anecdote. I recently visited Yellowstone National Park, and at one of the visitor center, uh, I read about this gentleman, Harry Yount, and he has the distinction of basically being the first park ranger of Yellowstone. He was called the gamekeeper back then, but it's a bit of a ridiculous story. If you've ever been to Yellowstone, you know how vast it is, how absolutely enormous it is, and the rugged wilderness. Um, I'm sure is very similar to what it was back when he was a ranger in the late 1800s, and back in soon after the inception of Yellowstone, he was alone tasked, but with no other help. He was alone tasked with preventing all the poaching that was happening in Yellowstone. And that was a huge problem back then from the Indians, from tourists, from anyone visiting the park, and he had to help maintain order. And it was so impossible, he quit after 14 months and basically said, you actually need a real police force to do this or some similar force. And some decades later, they actually made the Park Service, and they actually also had help from the U.S. military to maintain order. But I thought, well, what if he had no choice? What if he had to upkeep the park and keep order? What if him and even if he had a few other friends, a few other rangers to help him out, what if he to had a mission that he couldn't fail at? What would he have done? How would he have accomplished that impossible task? And that's kind of what I want to bring to Rangers of Old. You have this vast wilderness, and if I bring up the map again, and this could be any size. I mean, I was thinking that the game could represent a map. I mean, if this were 1 square mile, a hex, you know, and I expanded it out to what I want the map to eventually be, it might end up being like the size of the country of Ireland. I don't know if that's going to be the actual scale of the game, but it's going to be vast in scale. So it's about a group of rangers who are tasked with the impossible. Um, they're not just putting out forest fires, although they will do that. They're also battling monsters, keeping the peace uh, between elves and humans and other mysterious folk, and they're doing a lot of things that would be, token-esque, I guess you can say. Um, I will I will come back around to, I guess, what makes this game, what I'm planning to do this game to make it fun. But hopefully you got kind of an idea of what I want this game to be and where I'm going with this. So, what is the game going to be really? As far as not just story and feel, but what about gameplay? Well, sorry, I'm kind of going back to the inspiration part again, but here, this is a screenshot from the Civilization 5 game, a great game. Um, if you haven't played anything in the Civilization series, I highly recommend it. Civilization 6 is coming out soon, um, and I'm going to buy it and probably spend a few hundred hours playing it. But this is a great example of a gameplay that I kind of want to capture the feel of. You notice here there's hex-based tiles. This is a map overlay. You play this game on a map. I mean, the map is really what you see for 90% of what when you're playing this game. You see this map, you pan around, see different places where your cities are in relation to other people's units and other cities and continents. The map really represents a character of its own, an implied character of its own, and it's something I've always wanted to capture. Another inspiration, this screenshot happens to be from the Hearts of Iron 4 game, um, but there are other very similar games published by Paradox, developed by Paradox Interactive, and they all have a similar type of feel and gameplay. Like Civilization, it takes place on a map. It's not hex tiles, you can see here, hopefully, the borders, and it's basically a custom tiled map. I mean, every one of their games, every one of Paradox's games is kind of like a world map, subdivided into like hundreds and thousands of little uh, units or game tiles and done manually. Don't mind that noise, that's just my cat being a dick. Um, but anyways, this is kind of what I'm going for as far as feel, as far as what you're going to see when you play this game. So that's what I've told you what it's going to be thematically and what it's kind of going to be like gameplay wise. Well, why make this game? Why is it going to be any different? Well, I want to make this game first of all because I want to complete a game. I want to make a game. It's fun for me, even if it's not wholly unique. I still want to develop the game because I just think it would be great fun. Um, but I do think there's going to be a lot of unique elements to this game. Um, I mean, it's whereas these games like Hearts of Iron, like Civilization, like Crusader Kings 2, and Europa Universalis, I mean, they all have a very similar type of theme, and that theme is expand and conquer. I mean, you cannot get away from those themes. They really try hard, especially in the Civilization series and in later iterations. They really try to get away from that. You must conquer to win game type of gameplay, but you really can't truly get away from it. I mean, that's what the gameplay is based on. I don't really want that in this game. It's really the Rangers game is really going to be a game about managing a certain part of this forest. I mean, I'm probably not going to call it a park. I'm just going to call it whatever forest. It's about a game about managing that forest, keeping the peace, being a sheriff of sorts, it's not about expanding. You know the map when you first start off. You know what your sovereignty is, or something like that. Maybe some kingdom does decide to invade the forests, and you have to fight it back because it's supposed to be neutral territory. Maybe I'll have something like that. But the point is, it's not a war game. You're not seeking to get more territory. You're just seeking to do a mission that your character thinks is important, or your group of characters think it's important. Um, and I think that's been missing out in a lot of these grand strategy or simulation games. You know, there's going to be combat certainly, but there's not going to be really like open warfare. It's going to be about exploration. You know, what happens when you go into this dense forest here? You find ancient ruins of a lost civilization. Do you find an old wizard's tower that looks abandoned, but maybe it's really not? Um, you go over this tile? Sorry, I got my mountain pointer on. Um, do you go to this tile and find a group of goblins that just want to live peacefully away from those pesky, violent humans? I mean, what happens when you truly explore this? I mean, that's another thing that's been missing from a lot of games for a very long time. Exploration, and most modern strategy games isn't really exploration. I mean, if you play a game like Europa Universalis, you may start as a European colony or a European power like England. If you want to explore, you know, since you're playing on a world map, that you just have a ship and sail west and you'll discover America. That's not really exploring. In my mind, exploring, the fun part of exploring is very much akin to Star Trek. Well, what mysteries do you find? What really, you may have a map of of how to get from point A to point B, of where mountains are, of where planets are in Star Trek's case, but what do you really find when you explore these things? And that's one thing I kind of want to get into in this game. Um, so other things, other kind of features about this game that might make it different from other games. You know, I think that it's going to have an RPG-ish type element, even though your starting character, I think, will be able to permanently die. You know, so permadeath will be part of the game. I still think there's going to be like role playing and like a storyline, an event system that kind of drives and compels your group of characters forward into this world and into this story. Um, you know, and finally, you know, kind of honoring the Game of Thrones GRRM model that no one's life is sacred. I mean, I think that this game is going to be full of hard choices. You know, they're going to kill your characters or harm your characters, or they're going to harm other characters in this story or in this world. And there's not going to be much you can do about it because you have a choice of A or B, and they're both shitty choices. But you have to choose the lesser of two evils. And I kind of want that to just be a theme throughout the game, that you have choices, but a lot of times you don't really have a good choice. And therefore, you can't just min max the game where you figure out what the best choices are for each event, for each encounter, and conquer those encounters. You have to manage those encounters and just survive them, really. So, anyways, I've talked about what this theme is going to be and where I kind of want it to go, or what I kind of want it to look like. So, what do I have so far? And how did I get to this point? Well, just a brief history about how I wanted to develop this game originally. So, you're looking at Tiled. Like I said, it's a utility that works great if you want to import something like this into Unity. Well, you can see here, it's wonderful for making maps. I mean, all I need to do is make sure I have, you know, this tile set created, you know, in GIMP or Photoshop or whatever you want. Have my art load it into tile size bits, and then I just paint away. And I'm like, when I first started using this, I thought this was going to be the workhorse of my game, and I was just going to make the map with this, and the map was going to work and be a game object and work fine with what I wanted to do, but that wasn't the case. So what actually happened is when I exported this through another utility into Unity, I realized that this map only comes over as a singular mesh. And like I said before, what I'm kind of hoping to have in this game is a feature where, or a feeling where the map itself is a character of its own. Things on the map might change. You know, this might be a forest fire that the rangers have to fight, and before they extinguish it, well, it happens to burn this part of the forest down. And, you know, insert charred forest remain tiles, which I haven't illustrated yet. Or maybe weird wizard who lives in a mountain here turns a dormant volcano into a very active one, and, you know, now you have a river of lava flowing from point A to point B. Maybe the marauding horsemen from the east, you know, maybe they decide to dam this river here and cause destruction. And it's not just changing what the map looks like. I mean, it's each game tile needs to be kind of an object of its own, because it's gonna, I envision it holding certain data, some important data, or event triggers, or, you know, maybe temperature. It's, you know, it's warmer down here in the high desert and plains, and colder up here in the north, where it's closer to tundra. Maybe that's important to the gameplay and maybe even to the story. You know, and maybe the seasons change and they affect different tiles differently. In any case, I want the game objects to be basically interacted with. These tiles to be game objects and be interacted with. So, what option did that leave me? Well, that made me realize I really need to do more work inside Unity itself. So what I did, first of all, let me just run this and show you what I have. What comes up. So this is, saying this is a map would be generous, but it's a script that, it's the start of a map maker, is what I'm trying to say. And the number of tiles that you see here is the same number of tiles that you would get on a Civilization 5 huge map. So basically like the maximum number of tiles you would have on a strategy game like Civ 5. I thought that was a decent benchmark to use for a tile game. And that was just to kind of make sure my frames per second didn't tank, just showing that many objects on the screen. That's hardly any downgrade in performance from just the editor state. Running that script didn't really hurt the frames per second at all, unless I'm missing something entirely, which could be possible. So, and if I go into this scene view here, I mean, this doesn't do a whole lot right now, but you can go into the scene view here. Actually, if I go in the hierarchy, you see this map object contains all of these hexes. Hexes which are automatically numbered and organized and layered correctly. And, you know, I hover over these, and you can see in the debug log on the lower part of the screen that, actually I got to go to the game view to do that. You can see I'm over hex 00. If I go one up, I'm over hex 01. If I go here, this is 40. You know, so, and if I actually click these, I made it so you can, like, this is just like a proof of concept to prove that I can interact with these tiles, that they are game objects. And in fact, if I go to the scene view, maybe, there's one other piece of metadata that they hold. Oh yeah, it's right here. So you see in this inspector here, hex data holder. This is just another proof of concept that it can hold, each one of these tiles is a game object that can hold data. In this case, I can, you know, say, well, this particular tile has an elevation of 4,500 feet because that might be important to gameplay. I don't know. And the nationality of this particular tile is Human Kingdom, whatever. Also, a place to put a camera game object. Like I said, this is just a proof of concept. I'm not actually going to have each one of these tiles hold a game object like a camera, but it can. I'm confident that it can do some useful things. And even with this little bit of metadata in there, I didn't see any detrimental performance in frames per second, even though I have, I don't know, about 10,000 tiles rendered here. So that's good news. But the bad news is I kind of had to start from scratch on how I wanted to approach this. But it's getting me to, and by the way, I realize that this is not a legitimate map. It's just 10,000 forest tiles layered one on top of another. So what this eventually is going to be is basically just a blank palette. It's going to be white hexes, and I'm going to create an editor script where I just basically paint, these different types of tiles into that blank canvas, one hex at a time. So that's really one of the main things I'm working on right now, is like a map editor extension that is within Unity. You don't know much about Unity. Unity is great for making like your own editor functions inside the engine itself, and that's probably one of the coolest features that I've encountered so far. And I haven't made a whole lot yet. I've made this. Actually, if I go, just say I'm gonna put one of my hexes into the hierarchy. Okay, great. And since it wasn't generated using that map script, might not. Well, this one actually, all these objects prefab have that map script. But what if I had something else? Hopefully, this is a better example. Oops. Okay, for some reason there's no. For some reason it's not rendering. Go to material, I go to sprites. Okay, here, blank hex. So I got a blank hex here. Well, it didn't have that metadata. I really need to populate elevation in it for some reason. Well, this hex data script. All right, well, you don't have any hex information. Here's a giant button. And now I can enter elevation in. Great. Just some simple ways I can interact with my game at the editor level. Like I said before, I mean, the main thing I'm working on right now is to be able to paint a map in the editor, paint game objects into the map and have it save, and basically start building that great implied character, the map, for my game. So tool sets is where I'm at right now. There's not a whole lot to show on the script side. You want to actually see my scripts. It's not, this isn't even my script. I was just using this to basically emulate. No, this one's actually my script. This tile window was a tile editor that I downloaded for free from this YouTuber that's referenced here. I wasn't going to use this script. I was just kind of using it as a guideline to build my own tile editor, because nothing you ever download from the internet, no Unity extensions, are ever going to work exactly as you want to work. So you end up having to change them anyways, and well, just why not just build them from scratch and have them do exactly what you want them to do? Is my thought on that. So not a whole lot going on that I can actually show. I can just show you kind of my intent and where I want to be with that. And hopefully in the next journal entry, I can kind of show some more tangible stuff, especially when I have the map editor made, and then I can just kind of roll and show you some really cool stuff. Other stuff that's going to come up, obviously the AI system is going to be big. How do enemies act? How does diplomacy work? How does the AI tie in with the event system, which will be its own thing together? That's what drives the story and the narrative of the game. What consequences do the events have, and how do they affect your gameplay and your characters? And then, I touched on this a little bit, but if I keep going and adding more stuff to these game objects, does this slow down the game? Right now, the intent is that these these game objects only hold metadata, very, very simple metadata, you know, and I will have another script, like an overall script, this mouse manager, which is a good example, which basically only tells me which hex I'm over and allows me to color a hex right here based on mouse clicks. I mean, I'm basically going to have an overall script that acts like a dispatcher um, to manage all these game objects. Because if I had a method or a function inside of each one of these objects, that would be 10,000 methods that would have to run through every frame. Because there's 10,000 tiles, a method for each tile, that would definitely crash my FPS, and so that's definitely not the way I want to go. But I think I have a plan to get around that, the plan that I've been talking about. So, anyways, last thoughts. I'm gonna finish this game when I finish it. There's no real plans on when this is gonna be done. It's a hobby of mine. I have a day job. It's gonna be done when it's done. Whether that's a year from now, whether that's 5 years from now, who knows? But it's fun for now, and I like what I'm doing. And if it's good enough, I will consider selling it or giving it away or something. But to do either of those things, I need this game to be good first, because I'd rather not be embarrassed by some shoddy game that I just threw out on the internet. So it's got to be good, and that's kind of where I'm going. Well, anyways, this video's gone on way too long already, so I'm gonna cut it here, and I hope you enjoyed this this little development journal here, and maybe I'll put out another one. All right, this is Ryan signing off. Thanks.